Her ex made her car disappear into the dark. What came next, nobody saw coming. A stranger's hands, a secret world, a love that was never supposed to happen. Some rescues change everything. Drop your location in the comments, and if you're new here, subscribe. Let's keep breathing life into stories that were never meant to stay silent. Now let's begin. Alina's hands were shaking as she packed up her desk at the firm. It was almost midnight. The office was empty. The lights in the hallway flickered once, and she spun around so fast she knocked her coffee cup off the edge of the desk. Nothing was there. She let out a slow breath and pressed her palm against her chest. Her heart was going crazy. "You're okay," she whispered to herself. "You're okay." But she didn't believe it. She grabbed her phone and called Mercy. "Hey, you still at the office?" Mercy answered right away. "Yeah, I'm about to leave." Alina looked toward the window. The city was dark and wet. Rain had been falling all evening. "I just have this feeling again, like someone's watching me." "Alina," Mercy's voice dropped, "you need to tell the police again." "I did tell them, 3 times. They said there's nothing they can do unless he actually does something." She laughed, but it wasn't funny. "Apparently standing outside my building for 2 hours doesn't count as a threat." "That's insane." "Yeah," she zipped her bag, "it is." Marcus had been following her for 4 months. Her ex. The man she had dated for 2 years before she finally found the courage to leave him. She had a restraining order, a piece of paper. That's all it was. A piece of paper that Marcus laughed at. She took the elevator down alone and walked fast to her car. The rain was cold on her face. She kept her keys between her fingers the way Mercy had taught her. She didn't breathe right until she was inside the car with the doors locked. She drove. The city faded behind her as she got on the bridge, Crestview Bridge. It was long and high, crossing over the river that cut through the edge of the city. At night, with the rain, you couldn't see the water below, just darkness. She was almost to the other side when it happened. A sound like a gunshot. Her rear tire exploded. The car jerked hard to the right. Alina screamed and grabbed the wheel with both hands, but the car was already spinning. She pumped the brakes. Nothing. The wet road gave her nothing. The car hit the side barrier and she felt it crumple like paper. Then there was a horrible second where everything was still. And then the car went over. The drop was fast, wind and cold and glass. Alina's seatbelt locked against her chest. She hit the door handle. She hit the window. The car tilted forward and she saw the black water rushing up toward her. She didn't think, she just moved. She punched the window release and the glass dropped. The car was falling sideways now, spinning slowly. She pushed herself out through the window with everything she had, and her hand caught something. A jagged piece of the bridge edge. A broken slab of concrete hanging over the river. She grabbed it. Her body slammed into the side of the bridge. Pain exploded through her shoulder. Below her, the car hit the water with a sound like thunder. She held on. Her fingers were slipping. The concrete was wet and sharp and it was cutting into her palms. She tried to pull herself up, but there was nothing to push against. She was just hanging there in the dark and the rain, and her arms were giving out. "Help," she said, then louder, "Help." Her right hand slipped. And then someone grabbed her. 2 hands, strong and sure, locked around her wrists, not just grabbing her, holding her, like they would never let go. She looked up. A man was lying flat on the bridge above her, his arms hanging over the edge, his face hard and calm in the rain. Dark eyes, sharp jaw, soaking wet but completely steady. "I have you," he said. His voice was low and clear. "Don't let go." "I can't hold." "You don't have to," he pulled. It wasn't slow. He lifted her like she weighed nothing, hand over hand, until she was over the edge and collapsed on the wet pavement of the bridge. She was shaking everywhere. Her palms were bleeding. Her shoulder screamed with pain. The man crouched beside her. He wasn't panicking. He was watching her face the same way a doctor would. "Can you move your fingers?" he asked. She opened and closed her hands. "Yes." "Your legs?" She moved them. "Yes." He nodded once. Then he stood up and looked at what was left of her car in the river below. His jaw got tighter. "That wasn't an accident," he said quietly. She looked up at him. "What?" He turned and looked at her. "Your tire didn't blow on its own. Someone cut it." He said it like a fact. No drama, just a fact. "How do you know that?" "Because I saw the man who did it." Alina stared at him. The rain fell between them. "I'm Julian," he said. He held out his hand. She took it. His name was Julian Caruso. She didn't know that name yet. She would learn what it meant later. But right then, on that bridge in the rain, he was just the man who had pulled her out of the dark. He didn't call the police. He made one phone call in a language she didn't understand, and within 10 minutes a black car appeared. 2 men got out. They were quiet and fast, and they helped her into the back seat without asking questions. "Where are you taking me?" she asked. "Somewhere safe," Julian said. He got in beside her. "You need your hands looked at, and your shoulder." "I should call the police." "You can do that after." He looked at her. "But the man who did this to you won't be stopped by police. You know that already." She didn't answer, because he was right. The clinic was private, clean and white and quiet. A doctor named Rita met them at the door. She didn't ask how Alina got hurt. She just looked at her hands and her shoulder and got to work. 17 stitches across her palms, a bruised shoulder, a cut above her eyebrow she hadn't even noticed. Julian waited outside the door the whole time. When she came out, her hands were wrapped in white bandages, and she felt hollow and tired, and still a little like she might fall apart. He was standing by the window. He turned when he heard her. "You should eat something," he said. "You're very calm for someone who just pulled a stranger out of the sky," she said. Something moved in his face, not quite a smile. "I've seen worse nights." She believed him. She sat down and he brought her tea. Real tea, not a bag in hot water. She held the cup with both bandaged hands, and he sat across from her, and he told her what he had seen. He had been crossing the bridge in his car when he saw a figure crouch near the back of Alina's car in the parking area at the bridge entrance. The figure did something to the tire. Fast. Practiced. Then stepped back into the shadows and waited. Julian had pulled over. He had his own reasons for crossing that bridge that night. He had watched. And then when Alina's car went over, he ran. "Did you see his face?" she asked. "Yes." "Do you know who he is?" Julian looked at her for a moment. "His name is Marcus Webb. He has a restraining order against him, filed by you." The air went out of her. "You already looked him up." "I have people who are fast," he said simply. She set the tea down. "Who are you, Julian?" He didn't look away. "Someone who can help you if you let me." She should have been more scared of him. She knew that later. A man who could get that kind of information in the time it took to stitch her hands, who had a private clinic and men who asked no questions, and a voice that didn't shake even when he was pulling someone out of the sky. She should have run. But she was tired of being afraid of the wrong person. "Okay," she said. He took her to his estate the next morning after she refused and then changed her mind twice. The estate was outside the city. Long driveway, iron gates, trees on every side. Big stone house that looked like it had been standing for 100 years. Men walked the perimeter. She counted 4 on the way in. Julian showed her a guest room that was bigger than her whole apartment. He told her she was free to leave whenever she wanted. He told her no one would come into her room without permission. He told her dinner was at 7. Then he left her alone. She walked around the room and looked at the window that faced the garden. There was a small stone chapel at the edge of the garden. Old, maybe older than the house. As the sun started to go down, she saw Julian walk out of the house, cross the garden alone and go inside. He stayed for 20 minutes. Then he came back out and walked back to the house. She thought about that for a long time. She hadn't planned to stay more than one night, but that evening her phone rang. It was Mercy. "Elena," Mercy's voice was tight. "Someone was outside our house today, just standing there. Leo talked to him and he ran." Elena closed her eyes. "What did he look like?" Mercy described him. "It was Marcus." Elena called Julian. He answered on the first ring. "I'll stay," she said, "for now." "I know," he said. She didn't ask what he meant. The days at the estate moved slowly at first. Julian was often gone in the mornings and sometimes at night. When he was home, they ate dinner together. He asked her questions about her work. She was an architect. She had been designing a community library before all of this started. He listened the way most people didn't, like the words actually mattered. One evening, she asked him about the chapel. He was quiet for a second. Then he said, "My mother built it. She believed that whatever a man does in the dark, he should have somewhere to answer for it." "Do you," she asked, "answer for it?" He looked at the candle between them. "I try." She didn't push further, but something about that answer stayed with her. Marcus wasn't done. Julian's man, a quiet, sharp-eyed man named Daniel, brought them the report one morning. Marcus had shown up at Elena's workplace, had walked right past the front desk and asked for her. Security had removed him, but the message was clear. He wasn't afraid. Julian read the report and set it down and said nothing for a long moment. "The law won't hold him," Elena said. She had been saying it for months. Nobody listened. Julian looked at her. "No, it won't." He stood up from the table, "but something will." She grabbed his arm without thinking. "Julian, don't do something that puts you in prison." He looked at her hand on his arm. Then he looked at her face, and something in him changed just slightly, like a door opening an inch. "I'll be careful," he said. It wasn't the promise she had asked for, but it was honest, and somehow that was better. The morning everything broke open started quiet. Elena was in the garden with her sketchbook. She had started drawing again, something she hadn't done in months. The fear had taken that from her too. But here, behind the iron gates and the tall trees, something in her had started to loosen. She was sketching the chapel when Daniel came running across the grass. His face said everything before his mouth did. "They took Leo," he said. Elena stood up so fast her sketchbook hit the ground. "What?" "This morning, outside his office, 3 men. Sarah called Mercy, Mercy called us." Daniel was already moving back toward the house. "Julian needs you inside, now." She ran. Julian was in his office with 2 men she hadn't met. One was tall with gray at his temples and eyes that had seen too much. The other was younger, compact, with a scar along his jaw. Julian introduced neither of them. He was on the phone, and his voice was in that low, flat tone that she had learned meant he was the most dangerous. He hung up and looked at her. "Leo is alive," he said first. "They want me to know that. They want me afraid." "Who?" Elena asked. "The Morty family," he said it plainly. "They run operations on the south side. We've had an agreement for years. They broke it." He paused. "They've been working with Marcus." The room got very still. "Marcus went to them," Elena said. "Marcus offered them something valuable," Julian said. "You, as leverage against me." She stared at him. "Why would you being connected to me give them leverage?" Julian looked at her for a long moment. The 2 men in the room looked at the floor. "Because they know I won't let anything happen to you," he said quietly. She didn't say anything. She didn't know what to say. Julian turned back to the map on his desk. It was a layout of the docks on the south side of the city. He put his finger on a cluster of warehouses near the water. "They want me to come alone to the shipping yard tonight," he said. "No men, no weapons. They'll release Leo when I arrive." "That's a trap," Elena said immediately. Of course it is. He looked up at her, which is why I'm not going alone. The man with the scar, who Elena would later learn was named Vincenzo, leaned over the map. We can move 2 teams through the east access point before dark. The third team comes in from the water. How many men do they have inside? Julian asked. 12 that we've confirmed, possibly more. Julian nodded slowly. He studied the map like he was reading a book he had read before. Then he looked at Vincenzo. We go in at 11, Julian said. We bring Leo home. Elena grabbed Julian's arm again, same as before. He looked at her hand, then at her face. Let me call Sarah, she said. She doesn't know what's happening. She thinks the police are handling it. The police know nothing about this. I know. Elena held his eyes. Let me be the one to call her. She's my friend. She needs to hear my voice. Julian looked at her for a second. Then he nodded. She went to the hallway and called Sarah. Sarah answered on the second ring and immediately started crying. Not loud, desperate crying. The quiet kind, which was worse. The kind where the person is trying to hold it together and losing. They said not to call police, Sarah whispered. Elena, I don't know what to do. Listen to me, Elena said, keeping her own voice steady even though her hands were shaking. The people I'm with are going to get Leo back. Tonight, I need you to trust me. Who are these people? Elena looked through the office doorway at Julian bent over his map, quiet and focused and certain. People who don't make promises they can't keep, she said. Sarah was quiet for a moment. Okay, she finally said. Okay. Elena hung up and went back into the office. The rest of the day was the longest of her life. Julian ate dinner with her at 6 like nothing was different. He asked her about the library project. She told him about the reading garden she had been designing, with benches low enough for children and lights strung between the trees. He listened. He asked questions. He told her it sounded like the kind of place his mother would have loved. At 8 he went upstairs. At 10 he came back down dressed in dark clothes. Vincenzo and Daniel and 4 other men were waiting near the back entrance. They moved quiet as water. Julian stopped in front of Elena. Stay inside, he said. James will be here and Paul. He named 2 of the men who walked the perimeter. Come back, she said. He looked at her face for a long moment, like he was memorizing it. I always come back, he said. Then he walked out the door. She sat in the kitchen with a cold cup of tea for 3 hours. James stood near the window. Paul was somewhere outside. The house was silent. She watched the clock and thought about Leo, who was a quiet, kind man who taught history at the university and who had never in his life done anything that should have brought men like the Mortys to his door. This was her fault. That's what she kept thinking. At 1:17 in the morning, her phone rang. Unknown number. She answered. Elena, Julian's voice, calm. Leo is with us. He's shaken, but he's not hurt. She put her hand over her mouth. We're bringing him home, Julian said. It's done. She didn't cry until she hung up. Then she sat at the kitchen table and put her face in her hands and let it out. James pretended not to notice. She appreciated that. Leo arrived at the estate an hour later, pale and walking stiff, with Vincenzo's hand steadying him at the shoulder. Sarah was there by then. She had driven herself and nobody had been able to stop her, and she ran to Leo and held him in the doorway and neither of them spoke. Julian came in behind them. There was a cut on his forearm, wrapped in cloth. He walked past the reunion in the doorway with his eyes down, giving them their moment. Elena caught up with him in the hallway. You're hurt, she said. It's nothing. Let me see. He stopped. He looked at her like he was going to argue and then he didn't. He held out his arm. She unwrapped the cloth. A clean cut, not deep. She cleaned it herself in the kitchen while Leo and Sarah sat on the couch and held hands and didn't let go. Julian watched her work on his arm. You're not afraid of blood, he said. I used to be. She pressed the bandage down. Fear gets boring after a while. He looked at her. Is that what happened with me? The fear got boring. She looked up, something like that. Something moved in his face again, that door opening a little wider. They captured 3 of the Morty men that night. High-ranking men, Daniel confirmed. Julian sat across from the most senior of them in a room beneath the estate that Alina didn't ask about and didn't go near. What came out of that room changed everything. Marcus hadn't just been stalking Alina out of obsession. There was money involved. A life insurance policy, forged, massive, with Alina's name on it and Marcus as the sole beneficiary. He had planned the bridge that night not to scare her. He had planned it to kill her and collect. When Julian told her, she sat very still for a very long time. He took out a policy on my life, she said. 2 years ago, Julian said, before you even left him. She thought about the 2 years she had spent with Marcus, the things she had excused, the moments she had told herself were nothing. She felt sick, and then she felt something harder than sick, something that didn't have a clean name. What happens now? She asked. Julian set a file folder on the table in front of her. This is everything, the policy, the communications between Marcus and the Mortys, photographs, financial records. He tapped the folder. Every charge they need, fraud, attempted murder, conspiracy. He paused. I have a relationship with the district attorney. She raised an eyebrow. A legitimate relationship, he said, and there was the almost smile again. She owes me a favor. I helped with a case 2 years ago. She'll move fast on this. And the Mortys. They'll withdraw. They've lost too much tonight to keep fighting, and they know what I'll hand to federal investigators if they push. He closed the folder. It's over, Alina. She looked at the folder, then at him. Just like that, she said. It was never just like that, he said quietly. But yes, now it's done. The charges moved fast, exactly as Julian said they would. Marcus was arrested 4 days later. The DA's office called it one of the most complete files they had ever received, the kind that left no room for a clever lawyer to work. Alina was interviewed twice. Both times she was steady and clear, and she said exactly what happened. Mercy cried when she heard about the insurance policy. Leo went quiet and then said he wanted to buy Julian a very good bottle of something. Sarah just held Alina's hand for a long time without speaking. Julian quietly handed the Morty evidence to federal investigators through channels that would never trace back to him. The syndicate folded their operations in the city within 2 weeks. Not all at once, but steadily, like a fire running out of air. Alina stayed at the estate another month after Marcus was arrested, not because she had to, because she wanted to. She and Julian fell into a rhythm. Mornings she worked on her designs at the big table in the library. He brought her coffee without asking how she took it because he had paid attention. Evenings they ate together. Sometimes they talked for hours. Sometimes they sat with books and said nothing, and that was just as good. He told her about his father one night, a hard man who had built the syndicate on fear. Julian had inherited it at 24 when his father died, and he had spent every year since then trying to turn it into something his mother wouldn't have been ashamed of. He was not finished. He knew that, but he was trying. She told him about the year before Marcus, the woman she used to be, loud and sure of herself and not afraid of anything. She told him she wanted to find that woman again. She's already back, he said. She's been here since the bridge. Alina looked at him. How do you know? Because afraid people don't clean wounds and stare me down at the same time. She laughed, real full surprised. It felt like something waking up. He offered her the position over dinner, and then immediately said she should say no if she had any doubt. She said yes before he finished the sentence. The months that followed were the quietest and fullest of her life. She worked on buildings that would hold children and books and after-school programs. She hired Mercy as her assistant. She had dinner with Sarah and Leo every Sunday. She was not hiding. She was not checking over her shoulder. She was just living. And Julian was there, steady, present, never pushing, always paying attention. One evening in late spring, he asked her to walk with him in the garden. The sun was almost down. The light was that soft gold that made everything look like a painting. He led her to the chapel. He opened the small wooden door. Inside was simple. Stone floor, wooden benches, candles, a small window that caught the last of the sun. He had put flowers on the altar, white ones, simple. He turned to face her, and he held both her hands the way he had that first night on the bridge. The same grip, sure and steady and not letting go. "I am not an easy man to love," he said. "I know what I am. I know what I've done. I have spent years trying to balance what I've built against what I believe." He looked at her hands in his. "But I have never in my life been more certain of anything than I am of you." He reached into his jacket. The ring was simple, a single stone. It caught the candlelight. "Alina," he said, "will you stay?" She looked at him. This man who had pulled her out of the dark with both hands and never once asked for anything back. This man who prayed in a stone chapel and meant it. This man who listened when she talked and remembered every word. She thought about the bridge, the darkness below her, the hands that found her before she could fall. The same hands that were holding hers right now. "Yes," she said. He slid the ring onto her finger, and then he pulled her close and held her the way he had on the bridge, like she was something worth holding onto with everything he had. Later, walking back to the house through the gold evening, Alina thought about what fear had taken from her. The years she had spent small and careful and waiting for the next bad thing. And she thought about what one night on a bridge had given back. A hand that found hers in the dark. A hand that never let go. She held it tighter, and they walked home. Thank you for watching. Julian pulled her back from the edge when nobody else could. But here's the question. If the person who saves your life is dangerous, do you stay or do you run? Drop your location below and subscribe, because the next story might just pull you back from the edge too.